So you can open it up for questions. I've got at least 8. So who wants to start?
Maybe you.
Okay. Okay. Maybe a bit of history. Could you give a little bit of history on who the Mujahideen were and who the Taliban are and how they're related to Al Qaeda?
Okay, so people, most people confusing Mujahideen and Taliban with Al Qaeda. They have some similarities, of course, but they are different groups, or like Al Qaeda is like a network or maybe like a movement, not a group anymore. So Mujahideens were like holy warriors, people who came to Afghanistan to fight against the Soviet occupation. Mujahideens were founded by United States, CIA, to fight against this communist threat in this part of the world, because United States governments have this theory about domino theory. If one state will fall under influence of communism, other states will also follow this path, like a domino effect. So these were the Mujahideens. Talibans came into being in the beginning of the 90s. So Talibans were mostly Talib means a student. So they were like a student of Islamic teachings, most of in madrasas in Pakistani tribal areas. They came under the influence of these radical preachers who were talking to them about jihad, about this noble cause of dying for this Muslim thing. So then they came in Afghanistan, because after the Soviet withdrawal, Afghanistan was this like a total vortex. You have lots of warlords who governed particular parts of Afghanistan. This central government were really weak, or almost not existent, and so there were a lot of atrocities in these areas. And then Taliban came, and their first operation was like to save one little kid who was conducted by some warlord. They want to rape him. And Taliban came, killed the warlord. I think they hanged him on a tree in this village. So people were trying to accept, beginning to accept them like some liberators, some soldiers who will help them to restore order. And so when Taliban spread their influence on Afghanistan, one by one city fell under their influence. And during this their spreading, they become more and more radicalized, although they were really radicalized in the very beginning. So when they established their government in particular part of Afghanistan, they said, "Oh, girls, you are forbidden to go to schools. Men, you have to have a long beard, and so we have to be ruled by the Sharia law, which means we have to be devoted Muslims. No TV, no internet, no anything. This is some kind of Western devices which will poison our minds," or something like this. And Al Qaeda, as I told, they are formed during the Soviet occupation, but some of the Al Qaeda members were also Mujahideens, because they came from abroad to fight against the Soviets. But like lots of Mujahideens, after the war ended, they went to their homes, and some of them started to live normalized. Some of them were trying to plot some actions against the government. But these governments in these Muslim countries were autocratic, so it's not easy to operate. When the regime is so strict, he can follow you wherever you want to go or wherever. And then Al Qaeda started to wage this global war after this attack of Saddam Hussein on Kuwait and everything. So this ideology of like a holy war, jihad, exists among Mujahideen and Talibans and Al Qaeda, but there are similar groups. And for example, Talibans are not interested in global war, the global jihad. Al Qaeda is interested in global jihad, is their platform. I hope I was good to explain.
Yep. Who's next?
Yeah. Can you say anything more about the state terrorism, like in this case in the Middle East, because we talked before and you mentioned that the United States actually can be considered as state terrorists going there.
In particular cases, yes.
Yeah, can you say something about that?
Yeah, okay.
I also saw some videos like soldiers from the United States Army who are saying that actually what were they doing there was wrong and these kind of things.
Yeah. Okay, so when you're talking about state terrorism, there is like an inner state terrorism, which is perpetrated by a state to impose fear on their citizen. In this case, referring to, we're talking about state terrorism conducted in foreign countries. So, for example, for American attack on Afghanistan, we can say it's legitimate action because it was done by the supervision of the United Nations, and Taliban's were harboring Al Qaeda, perpetrators of this horrible atrocity in the United States. So in this case, we can say that Americans did the right thing. In the case of Iraq, the situation is totally different. Saddam Hussein was not connected to Al Qaeda. Saddam Hussein was a secularist, and Al Qaeda is religious, fanatics. Totally different thing. They want to overthrow the Saddam because of the geostrategic and geopolitical reasons. About Iraq and oil, it's a whole story. I don't think I have to explain more about that. But I think maybe the best example of state terrorism, especially we're talking about the United States, is the case of Nicaragua in the 80s. So United States founded extremist left organization in Nicaragua against the government. So, and this militia conduct really horrible crimes against the Nicaraguan people. They killed some priests, also Catholic priests. They found them obstacle to their goals. So they're fighting the government, and U.S. Founded their operation. So International Court of Justice then said that United States is guilty of state terrorism. This is the only single case in the world history that one state was proclaimed as a terrorist state by some judicial authority. Although, after that the United States said, well, we don't care about what you're saying, we are the United States. So I think this is like the most, this is the best example of state terrorism, in my opinion.
More questions? Okay, I'll ask another one. Let's see. In the USA, we have what is called a war on terror. Is that a misnomer or an improper name for what is happening all around the world? Is it
Yes.
possible?
For example, in the first place, what is wrong with this term? You cannot wage war on terror or terrorism. Terrorism is a tactic. So when the Allies fought against the Nazis during the Second World War, they didn't fight against the Blitzkrieg. They fought against the German soldiers. So in that case, we have a war against Al Qaeda, war against militant extremists, war on terror. What that mean? Because terror, someone can bully someone in a school. He's like someone who is producing terror. So this phrase, I think it's not good. Regarding to this whole global operation, anti-terrorist operation, we can say that in some cases it's proved. We can approve that because Al Qaeda presents a global threat, and so to have this say global policy fighting terrorism, fighting terrorists, it's okay. But this because this term is coined after George Bush said this is like a new crusade war or something, and then his advisors told him like, oh, this is not good word, crusaders, because in Muslim countries, you know what crusaders means, Europeans who came there to occupy their lands. So then it was like maybe some like a quickly coined term, but I think this is not the best word to say. But as far as a war against Al Qaeda's network, I think would be
much more informative.
Informative and clear. Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
What about terrorism in China throughout the history?
Terrorism in China?
And secret organizations like White Lotus and stuff.
I have to say I'm not so familiar with the terrorism in China, but I do know something about this western part of China. There's a big population of Muslims are living. They have some militant organization who want to not to overthrow China government. They're not capable to do so, but they want to establish some kind of like a separatist state within a state. They want to have like a ETA was fighting for the liberation of Basquiat to be independent states, but after they said we want to fight just for bigger autonomy. They also say that they are fighting for a bigger autonomy, but China is really oppressive country, you know, so they don't have so much space to do. If they have some like a massive mass demonstration or something like this militant organization to try to get people on their feet to go out the streets and say something as government, they're really quickly to oppress that, you know, just send some police and some military, bam, 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 and situation is calm. I heard about White Lotus, but I'm not so familiar about this.
Okay, other questions?
What are the rates of terrorist actions in the last 20, 30 years? Have they increased? Do they show tendency to increase, to decrease, or how do they go that kind of curve?
You have two curves. So one curve you have, it also depends on the year. Sometimes we have a curve goes like this. For example, during the September 11 attacks, you have lots of terrorist acts and plots. And then after this US invasion on Afghanistan, Iraq, you have this peak, and they're a little slow. But then also because when Americans came in Iraq, people consider them as liberators, you know. But after, like in a couple of months, because of their wrong policy of trying to impose some order, people start to rebel against the U.S. governments. So you have Al Qaeda in Iraq, you have lots of militants there, and so this curve also started to go up, you know. And at some point, there was like 2-3 years in a row, and then we have also this curve started, you know, to go down. On the other hand, we have this curve where the experts trying to explain, for example, that maybe the number of terrorist acts in one point was lower, but the number of people who were dying in these atrocities became bigger. For example, you have in 2001, attacks, 9/11, you have one single terrorist attack, but this terrorist attack killed 3,000 people, you know, which is like really, really big, you know, big casualty. So this curve just go, you know, like this. It depends on now. I think now the curve is on, maybe we can say like some average and lower level than maybe 10 years ago, for example.
Okay, more questions?
Yeah. We are all familiar with the pejorative sense of the word terrorism, right? So, like, those who are called terrorists, they call themselves freedom fighters or liberators.
Yeah,
like that. And the American government called the Taliban's liberators at the beginning, in the 80s, when they were fighting Soviets. Now they call them terrorists, right?
Well, they were called Mujahideens.
In Afghanistan, right? Now they call them terrorists. So I think I heard that, like, before those terrorist groups, which I mentioned in the introduction, they used to call themselves terrorists in a way, like, because they are using a tactic. They're going to a frontal war, they're using this tactic. Mm-hmm. So when did this word terrorist became a pejorative word?
But this, as you said in your introduction,
the Irish, they are called terrorists.
No, they are not considering themselves as terrorists.
Yes.
Anarchists, as you said, they call themselves a terrorist. Because they thought this is like a noble thing to do. Because they were fighting not against civilians, but what they were thinking, you know, we are fighting against oppressive governments. So it's like members of government or police who are oppressing people. They're legitimate targets. But for any civilian, we cannot say that this is a legitimate target, of course. But this term terrorism has this politically meaning, you know, and that's why, for example, if we want to discredit someone, we will call him terrorist. If we want to give him some credit, we will call him freedom fighters or liberators. That's why during the war against the Soviets, against the U.S. enemy, They call them liberators. You know, they're freedom fighters. They gave them weapons and everything. But there's like this really thin line between terrorists and freedom fighters, because sometimes freedom fighters can also be terrorists. Good example is ANC in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was one of the leaders of the ANC, and he was also leader of one extremist group. It was like a Spear of the Nation, I think was the name of this group. So when they were fighting against government, which was, you know, oppressive, they treat black population as a second-grade citizen. This apartheid regime was really cruel, and so when they start to express their feelings against this regime by peaceful meaning. They were going on the streets, they're trying to protest, they want to say this is wrong what they do, you have to change your policy. But then police came on the street and in Soweto killed 120 people in a couple of minutes. So after these kind of atrocities, they said, okay, we don't have any choice. If we want to topple this government, if we want to, if our fight will result in some kind of political change, that means we have to take our weapon. Then they start to attack police and military. In this case, we can also say this. In this case, police and military were legitimate target of the rebellion. But when they started to plot some bombs and killing civilians, in this case, we cannot just say like they are freedom fighters. They are also terrorists, because they want to impose, they want to frighten the citizen in order that they will start to feel insecure in their environment, and they will start to oppress government, do something, change your policy, because we cannot live like this. In this case, we can talk about terrorism. So like I think this is a good example how to make a difference between terrorists and freedom fighters. For example, in IRA also, in Ireland. So in the beginning, IRA's fight was against British soldiers who occupied Ireland. My friend from England maybe not agree with this term occupation, but okay, so they were there, and their like, freedom of speech, of public life, okay, but the political life was not so much, how to say, open, and they were oppressed by the occupiers. So they started to wage war against the soldiers. But after this was part of Ireland, now Republic of Ireland, became independent, some extremists in the Ulster, they started to fight against the British and against the Irish also, who said, okay, we have now independent Ireland, now we can talk with the British government about reconciliation and everything. But they said, no, we have to kill British, it doesn't matter, you know, civilians or soldiers, whatever. In that case, we're talking about terrorists, not freedom fighters anymore. Civilians are never legitimate target. I will not accept that in any case.
Yeah, but so, like I have the feeling that at the beginning the word terrorism meant only the tactic, and you also said tactic.
Yeah, tactic.
Right?
Yeah.
So not necessarily killing civilians or not killing civilians. Like, so.
But now also, sorry.
So now terrorist is someone who is bad, right?
Yes.
Because he's killed. So if a freedom fighter kills a civilian, he becomes terrorist, and he loses the title of freedom fighter.
It depends.
It's kind of like they overlap, right? The freedom fighters also can kill civilians.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those who don't kill civilians can be also terrorists because they're
Yes.
using the tactic of terrorism,
Yeah.
right? You agree with this?
Yeah. For example, in Germany, in the 70s and 60s, we have this extreme right, terrorists like RAF, who were fighting against government. They want to topple the democratically elected government in Germany, then Western Germany, and they want to impose this totalitarian regime, communist regime. And but they were plotting bombs, but their main targets were government. Also, they killed some civilians in these actions, but the primary targets were not civilians. They just want to impose the fear and everything. But they were terrorists, of course.
Well, do you know something about the Weatherman organization in the United States?
United States, yeah.
They didn't kill any civilian, right? For like about 10, 12 years of activity. They were bombing government institutions and firstly demonstrating against Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
Because they decided we need to bring the war home so people can feel how it is.
Yeah.
But they didn't kill anybody. They killed one person. There was a member of the group because the bomb exploded while constructing. But after 12 years, they actually decided to stop doing that. And it was a very interesting case because they, one member joined the Black Panthers and ended up badly, but others, some of them became professors at universities, became public figures. And how would you call them? You know, that 20, 30 years ago they were bombing institutions and living underground life, and then they end up as a public figures. What are your feelings about this? If you heard about this group?
Well, yes, I heard about that group. I was writing something about them in my PhD thesis also. Just like some short information about that. Well, they were fighting against democratically elected government that makes them terrorists. Regarding to this, what you were talking about. So those guys who planted bombs and destroyed property, they did their time in the jail.
One person is in the jail, and actually there's a huge, long process because he is in the jail as a criminal, and he wants to have the status of a political prisoner. So one person is in the jail. Another one was killed or is in the jail. I don't remember because joined the Black Panthers, and you know, it was involved in the violent attack on some bank or something. But couple, I don't know, 3-4 people, they are activists, or at least 2 people are professors at the university. So
obviously, the government knows about these people. So if they decided, okay, we will press charges on 10 of you. 2 of you will go to jail because you were like main perpetrators. Other, you will get some like paroles or something. So after they are integrating in the society, in the liberal democracies, you can do after whatever you want, in order not to oppress others, of course. So if someone can give you a place on a faculty, or will employ you in your company, or despite your history, it's okay. In democratic elected countries, it's okay.
but for you personally, they are terrorists because they were
terrorists. They were fighting against democratically elected government. You know, they were destroying property because violence is not an answer. You can protest, you can everything, you can put some slogans, do everything.
So,
but if you're planting bombs, that means you're endangering someone's security.
Yeah, but I think that why they did this is they used all.
Hold on. Do you have a question? Hold on. Do you have a question?
No, we're just talking about this. I mean, you're saying that it's not to bomb everybody and the violence is not an answer. But what if the government is very violent to its people and oppressive? Yeah.
Then you have a right.
Yeah. So then it's not considered terrorism, right?
Well, it depends. If you're fighting just like government soldiers and everything who is oppressing you with weapons, what happened in Libya, in Syria. So people went out in the streets and say, we want some democratic changes. This is autocratic regime. We want to change. So they didn't want out with guns and bombs and start to killing people. They were trying to express their opinion against the government in a peaceful way. And then government came out and started killing people, shelling bombs and everything. And then people say, okay, we cannot do anything. We have to take guns. In that case, I think the rebellion is the right thing to do.
It's exactly the case of Waterman, because they claim that we use all peaceful means, demonstrations, petitions, and so on, and the war in Vietnam didn't stop. So they decided to go underground and they bring war home.
Yeah, but the point is that the U.S. government, which democratically elected, decided to go to the war, and people on the elections gave them like a mandate to do so. So after 4 years, you have elections. Topple this government, but like a legitimate means. Vote for someone who will end this war. No. Because they were trying to accepted this I think ideology of Che Guevara, like let's produce so many Vietnams, you know, so we'll bring war home. So between Che Guevara had this idea to spread his war in Latin America. Let's make more Vietnams, you know, like fighting against the government. So they adopted this thinking with their thinking, you know. So like we will bring Vietnam home, and in this case we'll change the regime. But so this this government was democratically elected. So if, for example, my country, Croatia, we have some soldiers in Afghanistan. So maybe I'm feeling that it's not right thing to do. Why? Some people in Croatia say like, I don't want that our soldiers are fighting for some other cause, like a U.S. cause or British cause, but doesn't matter. No, but if I have different opinion than my girlfriend, that doesn't mean that I will go out with a rifle and start to killing, you know, police officers or all soldiers. It means I can go on the street, on the main square, and try to organize people, or let's express our opinion. Do not send our soldiers anymore. And then on the elections, I will have this political party. You have some political parties who are against that. I can vote for them and trying to change this. But if it's majority of people is for this policy, who's supporting that our soldiers go to against Afghanistan and fight or have peaceful like a mission. You know?
So the democracy is about numbers, right? So and,
yes.
And the government has
These
a
numbers.
bigger means for propaganda and convince people to their logic. And you as a minority, you will never have this power to, you know, to gather more people to overvote this or that government.
I think we are going into another topic now. We're talking about democracy.
Yeah.